When you consider what's happening in D.C. right now, this very minute, it's clear the road to tyranny we've told you about has led us to the madness of America's march toward tyranny. Hi, I'm Stuart Shepard. This is First Liberty Live. First, before we get started, just a reminder for you to please like and share our videos. That's pretty much the only way people get to see these, is if they get shared around on the web or come looking for them. So we appreciate so much when you share those with your friends and family. If you find them interesting, they probably will too, except for that one aunt, and we want to talk about her. Our guest today is Jeff Mateer. He is an Executive Vice President and also Chief Legal Officer here at First Liberty Institute. Hi, Jeff.
Stuart, great to be here.
It's good to have you back. Now, you just started in October, but you kind of caught your own rebound because you actually worked here prior, some years ago at First Liberty. Tell us about your history with the organization.
Yeah, and I'd like to think it's sort of like, not only did I catch my own rebound, I'm now positioned to take it up to the hole and slam dunk it.
There you go.
If we're going to use the basketball analogies a little bit. But yeah, I was, after about 20 years of practice, of law practice, Kelly Shackelford recruited me back in 2010 to join First Liberty the first time, and served as general counsel and did that for 6 years. Then went off onto another assignment at the Attorney General's office, where I served as First Assistant Attorney General of Texas. Did that for almost 5 years and returned here in October.
Yeah, and I got to know you that first time around because I was doing reporting for radio news and would call in and occasionally get to interview you. So it's good to meet you finally face to face.
Yeah, but did I do okay?
Yeah, you're doing all right.
I mean, sort of. Yeah,
most of the time. Yeah. Now, this month is March Madness. So people are talking about NCAA basketball. As we are recording this, we're waiting for Kentucky and Mississippi State to play. We hope that goes well, just saying. But as a lifelong...
Does that go Bulldogs?
Well, no, I'm from Kentucky. So as a lifelong Kentucky fan, we've seen some wins. We've seen some heartbreaking losses along the way. You also have won on the court, if you will, at the court, because you once represented the NCAA and helped protect the phrase March Madness.
Yeah, there were times in Dallas where I didn't tell people I represented the NCAA, because of course the NCAA gave the death penalty to my alma mater, SMU.
Ouch.
Which is actually one of the stories how I ended up, because it was like, how did this, this lawyer from Dallas end up representing the NCAA? And the answer is they wanted a law school graduate of SMU. And so I got to, during the 2000s, I got to work for the NCAA as their private counsel on several matters, but the most important matter, certainly for the NCAA, was representing them in a challenge to their trademark, March Madness.
Right.
And so a group in Dallas had sued to try to invalidate the trademark, and so I had the honor and privilege to represent the NCAA and tried that case for them, and then we went to the appellate court and won there, and then they sought Supreme Court review, and that was declined. So it's the reason that the NCAA still uses the term March Madness with regard to their basketball tournament, and why we're going to be careful to not use or appropriate their trademark today.
Yeah, and that's why you don't see March Madness tire sales, on television, because the NCAA is very protective of that.
Unless they've paid a fee to the NCAA.
And get the little hologram.
And then they get to use the term March Madness. So we're talking about marching towards madness, right?
Yeah, we are, and we're going to keep the basketball analogies going just to keep the conversation rolling along. We are perfectly serious about the topics we're going to discuss.
Absolutely.
Those who go along, especially this first one. California is wanting to, in a sense, steal the playbook of nonprofit organizations in the state, and First Liberty is working with a group there whose members could have their very lives put in danger if that information should be revealed. Unpack that for us. What's it all about?
Yeah, I mean, this is a march towards madness, because California a few years ago passed a donor disclosure law. It's a law that requires nonprofits to list and identify their donors and provide information. Now, that in itself is chilling and frightening, but even more so knowing that the state of California has done a really poor job of protecting the identity. They've had security breaches. We all read and hear about where hackers come in and the result is breaches. So that has happened here. And the California law, of course, has no consequences when it releases donor information.
Right.
So that's the setting. And so there's a case that's at the U.S. Supreme Court challenging the constitutionality of this law. First Liberty, we represent this really great group called, and I've got the brief that we filed in the Supreme Court. But the group that we represent is the Citizen Power Initiatives for China, which is a pro-democracy Chinese group. Its founder actually was at Tiananmen Square,
wow.
and he escaped from any, being put in jail, but then went back to China and was actually imprisoned in China. And then through international pressure, including the United States, he was released. He comes to the United States, forms a group, this Citizens Power Initiatives for China. We've got to figure out a shorthand for that, Stuart, eventually. But Citizens Power, and he solicits donors, including donors from who have relationship and in China. Actually, one of his donors, a major donor for him, has been put in prison. So think about that group who's now being required to identify its donors, give it to the state of California, who has no reason. They're not the IRS. They're the state of California, but we know what it's the effect of chilling them.
It's intimidation. It's to make donors think twice before they give to this organization over that organization.
And we talk about things, a lot of times in law, we talk about, in theory, things that could happen. So you think about a donor who's given to a nonprofit. Well, in theory, bad things could happen. Well, in this case, in reality, for these people, bad things have happened.
Yeah.
Donors are putting in. And look, don't put anything past the Chinese government. I mean, if anything the last few years have taught us, anybody can hack into systems. Anybody who can use methods to gain information, it's the Chinese government. So this is a it's an important case, obviously, for our clients, but it's really an important case for all nonprofits.
Yeah.
I mean, are we free to give and associate without the government keeping track of us?
Yeah, and that's an important point to this. I think any organization that, say, supports the pro-life issue or the marriage issue, the donors often don't want their names plastered all over the bulletin boards at the state government, where they're going to be singled out and maybe treated different on their taxes, or treated differently when they are doing business deals with the government or with other groups. They don't want to be identified in that way for them.
No, exactly. I think in this cancel culture, so-called cancel culture we live in, where whatever is the flavor of the month, who we're going to attack.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a bad law, a bad system, and the good news is it's unconstitutional.
Now, big tech and woke culture are also doing their own little. I was trying to think of a basketball analogy, their own pick and roll on this.
You can say dance, because this is the big dance.
Well, let's do this. They put on the black and white shirts, and they've grabbed a whistle, and they've decided to eject a couple of players. A couple of people who got ejected, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and author Ryan Anderson. And of course, we're talking about Amazon. Tell us what happened there and what should be happening.
It's disturbing. It's really disturbing, because you've got Dr. Ryan Anderson, someone that I've worked with, someone that Kelly Shackelford has worked with, a lot of respect, studied at Princeton and at Notre Dame, has written a book a few years ago, actually I think about 3 years ago, called When Harry Became Sally. And it's a book talking about transgenderism. And it's actually done in a very winsome, intellectual way. But
respectfully,
very, very respectful. And if anybody, if anybody has heard, and I'm sure some of our supporters and viewers have heard and seen Dr. Anderson, I mean, he's a very well-spoken, well-thoughtful individual, and his book reflects that. Dr. Anderson's book has disappeared from Amazon. It's no longer there, and they won't tell him why. We can all guess and suspect why.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, as I was preparing to discuss this with you today, Stuart, I got on my wife's Amazon account, because I don't have one. And so I started, typing and putting in some, just to see, if you can't get Dr. Anderson's book, what can you get on Amazon book-wise? Well, you can get Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. You can get The Communist Manifesto by Marx. And you can get, and I wrote it down just because the title, I mean, it's just, you can get a book about how to build a nuclear bomb and other weapons of mass destruction. If you and I wanted to get that book, we could probably get it. We'd order it, come tomorrow.
Please tell me you didn't order
We
that.
can go, well, I was afraid that Kelly might fire me if I did. So I did not. But we could, you and I, maybe that's an experiment you and I could do someday on First Liberty Live. We could, figure out how to build a nuclear bomb. But you can get those books. You can't get Dr. Anderson's. And the same thing. I mean, so if that's not enough, if that's not outrageous enough, so we have, and I'm often asking, who's your favorite current Supreme Court justice, and it was always a tie between Justice Scalia and Thomas, and of course Justice Scalia has passed away, so it's easy now. It's Justice Thomas. Well, PBS, that really conservative right-wing organization, PBS did a documentary called "Created Equal: Clarence Thomas in His Own Words." And Clarence Thomas gives an interview, talks about his very impoverished upbringing as an African American in the South, and how he has come to rise to be the second African American on the highest court in the land.
It's a powerful and important story if people haven't heard it.
Yes, and one that certainly during February, which is we celebrate African American history, one you would think you'd want to get out on through every channel. Well, it was on Amazon. Amazon Prime, we all log into Amazon Prime, we pick something. Well, it was there. It was one of the documentaries. In February, it disappears. Again, no explanation from Amazon why, but we can only suspect.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tragedy.
Now, to be clear, this is not a First Amendment issue because the government didn't yank those. But it is something important for our culture right now to be alert to this going on and to think about the consequences and what can be done or what should be done.
Right, and I think that's a very, very important point, Stuart. We don't believe that the First Amendment, nor do we want the First Amendment to apply to private companies. But when you have a company like Amazon who has market power and market domination, it could raise antitrust issues. Now, that's not a First Liberty issue. That would be an issue for the federal enforcers at the Department of Justice or the state enforcers at the various attorneys general's offices.
Yeah.
But for us, as well-informed citizens, we need to know, and certainly as people of faith, we need to know what these companies are up to, and the companies that, I'm sure us, you and I, our family, we make a fair number of purchases to Amazon. Well, we need to know that what these companies are up to and that they're not necessarily neutral. And, the question I have is, this seems to be, and again, we're waiting to hear Amazon's response. This seems to be censorship of a certain viewpoint, traditional, conservative, religious.
By a private company.
By a private company. And we need to know that as consumers. We need to hear their response. And the question I would have for Amazon right now is, who's next? I mean, who's next? And are they going to be the liberal company and they're going to cater to only liberals? Or do they really want to be an all-American company? And so, we'll wait and see.
And it's important for us as consumers, I think, to know that our options for what ideas we can find when we do searches for books or for films to watch or whatever, that those are being curated, that someone is going, this one but not that one. So those ideas are no longer being seen or heard. They're being pushed aside because, at least according to those who appear to be in charge, they don't see them as worthy anymore. We need to know that our perception of the world and the way we think about things can be influenced by that and just be sensitive to that. Let's talk about this. Imagine a basketball team where one team is losing and they're convinced the only way they can win is to put more players on the floor than the other team. So they call a timeout and then they send out, 6, 7, maybe 8 players on the floor to compete. Tell us about the latest efforts to defy the order that we've seen on the Supreme Court for so many years by changing the number of players on that court.
Yeah, I mean, this is another issue that so far is sort of going under the radar. But it may be the most important issue that's potentially facing our country right now.
And that's not an overstatement.
Not
really, even a little.
I really don't. I really don't think so. I think that is to use, I guess it's Tom Clancy's. We're going to mix metaphors, but it's clear and present danger, and I really believe that. Court packing, which is, I think you've set it up. It certainly it's at all levels of our system, but what's being proposed by some very well-funded and influential groups on the left, and actually by some leadership of the Democratic Party, they're proposing an expansion of our federal courts. So at the district court level, at the appellate court level, and very most importantly, at the United States Supreme Court. So currently, as I'm sure everybody knows, we have 9 members of the Supreme Court. President Trump got to put 3 members on because of deaths and retirements, and that has resulted in what some are saying a conservative majority. We'll see. I mean, judges don't always turn out to be exactly what people think, but we know he's appointed 3. And so the left has responded to that by saying we need to expand the numbers of the Supreme Court, and they're proposing 4 additional members.
And just to help people think through the numbers here, if you take the general consensus that there are 6 who tend to be conservative and currently 3 who tend to not be on the issue of how to view the Constitution, that's the numbers that we're looking at.
Yes.
So they're generally, and you can't say this about any particular case, but generally you're more likely to get a constitutional ruling out of the current court. So they're saying, well, if there's 6 on that team, we need to get some more players over here.
Right, and look, it's a power grab. I mean, there's not a principled argument for expanding the court.
Yeah.
The argument is, well, Trump got to put 3, so now we want to put 4.
Right.
And then if we do that, I mean, where's it stop? So when there's a President Kelly Shackelford in 4 years, you tell Kelly we said that about him.
Okay.
But whomever. There's a Republican president 4 years, so are we going to go from 13 to 17, and for a Democrat, and then we go to 7? I mean, where does that? Because it's all power, and it's about who has the majority and who can force things. That's not America. That's not our republic. And so this concept that through the political process that you can expand the United States Supreme Court will jeopardize the independence of the judiciary. Now, Jeff Mateer believes that. Kelly Shackelford believes that. I'm sure Stuart Shepard believes it.
Yep.
You know who else has said that he believes that? Joe Biden. When he was Senator Joe Biden, he actually said the idea of expanding the Supreme Court was a boneheaded idea. I agree with President Biden.
Well, on that one, I do too. I
agree.
Yeah.
I agree with it. And the thing, Stuart, that and people in some of our viewers may say, well, I'm not hearing anything about this. I mean, is this really happening? Yeah, no, it is. And one thing to watch, because just in the last few days, recent time, you're hearing about something called a filibuster, right? That's out there. That the Senate needs to eliminate the filibuster.
Which basically does what the Senate is supposed to do. It's supposed to be harder to pass legislation through the Senate. The founders saw the House as the place where passions would roam and the temper of the time would go this way and that. But they saw the Senate as the long-term body. That's why their terms are 6 years. That's why you have to have a larger majority to pass things, and that's where the filibuster comes in to get past that 60-vote majority that generally is needed to pass things in the Senate.
No, that's right. So the filibuster has existed for over 200 years, and it requires 60 3/5, so 60 senators.
The idea to get people to get to work together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You want a bipartisan on important pieces in legislation. You want a bipartisan effort, and that's exactly that's exactly the purposes. So you're now hearing calls for elimination of the filibuster, and everyone's looking at me. What's Joe Manchin? Because Joe Manchin is the senator from West Virginia. He is a more moderate Democrat, and so you're hearing he's become a very powerful person in a 50-50 Senate, and they would need him as they would, and all the Democrats to join in eliminating it. But if the filibuster is eliminated, then in a good Texas expression, but Katie bar the door.
Yeah.
because it'll pave the way for some really bad legislation.
Which we're going to talk about now. We're going to have Keisha Russell on a future episode coming up very shortly to talk about the Equality Act. But while you're here, one of the bits of legislation they're wanting to try to press through by getting past the filibuster is this so-called, and I always put it in quotes because it's the only way to refer to it, the Equality Act, because it's equality for some but not for you and not for you. Now, give us your point of view on the Equality Act, and we'll let Keisha unpack it in great detail later, but just set up that conversation.
Yeah, and Keisha will do an amazing job doing it. But I think there are a lot of problems with it. I mean, a lot of problems. But I think to start with, and for me, fundamentally, there is no recognition. It is silent on religious liberty rights. And so you have this act that purports to protect rights of those members of the LGBTQ plus community. And we can debate, whether that's good or bad. But what I do know is bad is it's silent. There's no recognition, no religious exemption for people of faith or institutions of faith.
Yeah.
And why that's important, Stuart, is that, what about a church who wants to follow orthodox biblical principles concerning these matters? What about agencies that provide adoptions?
Yeah.
What about people who just want to live out their faith? Where are they in this calculus? Well, as of right now, in what was passed by the U.S. House of Representatives on a strict party line vote, there are no protections.
Yeah, and that would seem to run headlong into the First Amendment that promises that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion and the free exercise thereof. It's the free exercise part that runs just directly into.
It does, and of course, and I think maybe you've talked about with your viewers before, but the free exercise jurisprudence is developing, and we're going to see those cases. I mean, and the best example of that is I know somebody that you and I both love very dearly is Coach Kennedy.
Yeah.
And Coach Kennedy's case is going to explore in a different setting what does it mean to have free exercise in this country. But I agree with you. I think the Equality Act, first, it's bad. It's bad legislation, and I know Keisha will break that down next week. But if it somehow does pass, then there's no doubt we'll be right there challenging it.
You're going to have to be there. Now, Jeff, I just want to talk to you as a person for a second. I've known you for quite a few years.
Yeah.
We met many years ago. You're an accomplished attorney. You've got more than a few awards to your name along the way that we could name. You've got quite an impressive resume. You choose to work here at First Liberty. Why is your heart in this work?
When I was thinking about what was next for me when my time at the Attorney General's office was ending, it was, there really wasn't a decision. I knew I wanted to come back. That was always my expectation, is that I would come back to work with Kelly and just the amazing team. And we'll use some more basketball, although it's the NBA and the Olympics. We really have a dream team here. And just phenomenal lawyers, phenomenal people who support us and work with us every day. Get to work with you now, which you used to interview me. It used to be across a mic, but it was or usually on the phone and doing radio or something. But we just have a amazing team. But the current reality is there's not been a more critical time in the fight to protect our religious liberty rights. I think the attacks are occurring more. They're more real. They're more intense, and that's where we live in. And then I compare that to the hope we have. Not only is it the environment is the most hostile, at least in my lifetime. I also believe that really, in large part, the work that's been done the last 4 years that this organization's had a major part in getting good judges on the bench, in developing good case law, like our Bladensburg case, the Coach Kennedy case. We are poised, even though the attacks are coming and they're more intense, we're poised to have great victories. And look, I want to be a part of that, and get to work with Kelly and the team. And my sort of, people have life verses, and the one that I have tried to guide my life on is in Acts. Luke is describing Paul giving a sermon to a synagogue in Antioch, and he's describing David, and in describing David, he says that he served God's purposes in his generation, and so that's what I want to be about. And I think what we're doing here right now, the work that you and I get to do, and it's a privilege and honor that we get to do this work.
It really is, yeah.
That we're serving God's purposes in our generation.
That's a beautiful thought. Jeff, I'm so thankful you're here, contributing your gifts and talents to the work that we do. And thank you for making time for us today. Really appreciated hearing from you.
Thanks, Sturb.
All right. Hey, and we wanted to be able to connect directly with you, and that's why we created FirstLibertyLive.com. Some of you are watching this video there. Others of you may be watching it elsewhere. But we want to make sure you bookmark the website. It will even offer to notify you when you go to the site when we have live streaming events like we are doing today. Or if you want to get an email just alerting you to when we go live, just subscribe. And if the work we do and the victories that we achieve resonate with you, we invite you to become part of this. I mean, you can see that outcomes happen. You can help make that happen by your donation to the work of First Liberty Institute. Just click on the red donate button. It's easy to find on FirstLibertyLive.com, and we would be happy to have you join us in this work. And while I'm thinking about it, in the text below this video, you'll also find links to resources, articles, and posts, and also a free copy of the U.S. Constitution that we'd be happy to send your way. Just look for those links below, and we look forward to connecting with you. Next week, we're going to be talking with our attorney. She's new with us, Christine Pratt, and we're going to talk about legal rights concerning the COVID vaccine. I'm looking forward to this conversation because I really want to hear what she has to say on that. I think you'll find it very interesting as well, so we'll look forward to seeing you right here next week on First Liberty Live.